from doing church dramas to the local amateur musical theatre company when I was very young to, I think when I was in year 7, I started the Josh Reid fan club. Yeah, got a few members. None of them paid for it, for the privilege. And I paint, and I've sold some paintings, and I've made a film, some short films, and recently a feature film, and written a book, and doing stories and that sort of thing. So I tend to be fairly creative, but one of the things that I find when you are producing creative stuff is that a lot of people want to hang around you. And some of them are just leeches, you know, they haven't got a creative bone in their body, but they like to know a film producer or whatever. And others are the creative circle of people. So you've got these people who are very arty and dress very colourfully and have things in their hair. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But do you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people who are very arty, but I don't know if they're very creative, because creative people come in all types of careers. You know, everybody wants to have a creative accountant, you know, so we get more back on our tax.
I got that one.
Yeah. You know, but certainly, you know, most people who are entrepreneurial are very creative. They might not paint or sing or play guitar, but they are very, you know, very much they create stuff. So, what do you guys think, you know, creativity is? I don't think we need a mic or anything. Do you just want to like yell out stuff or put your hand up if you like? We're not in school. But what do you feel creativity is?
To arrive at a solution to...
Okay, yep. So, problem solving. Anything else? What creativity is?
Just thinking of on a radio perspective on the program, putting new ideas on how to do a program or improving it, the way you broadcast it or the way you're presenting it.
Like anything with like you said, anything like a new path. So if it's a new path to a solution, or it's a new path that no one's ever painted before, just a road that hasn't been trodden, or at least not much, and it's a new thing.
Yeah.
Something beautiful. Discontentment with what is normal.
Something that's unique and personalized.
Sorry, what was that last one?
Something that's unique and personalized. Something of your own.
Yep.
So, and to add to that last one, that resonates with somebody else.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
It's connections. Because it's really hard to come up with something brand new, but finding surprising connections.
Yep.
We'll also
Innovation.
add to that, bringing fresh and new
ideas to something that's in existence. Rather than doing it the same old way, then finding a new way to do it.
Innovative.
Yeah.
What about giving expression to concern or idea?
Yep. Giving an idea of voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that what's interesting here is that nobody said finger painting, or acting, or any of the things that often we call the creative arts, or creativity. And I do question, whether, I just know a lot of people, and a lot of creative people, and what tends to happen is that, these creative groups form, these support groups, and some are full of actors that I go to, and I've been to others full of artists, and then there's the writers, God help us. And what I tend to find is that most of these people, they aren't actually producing something. And when I think of creativity, I think of influencing culture, and I think of making something. Talking about culture, I think a good example for creativity and cultural influence is the Petri dish in a science lab. You've got this dish, and scientists put a bit of blood or a bit of old sausage or a piece of bread or something, and from what appears to be nothing, this ooze actually starts to grow, and the scientist literally is creating life inside the Petri dish, and they call that ooze a culture. So when I think of creativity, I always have to go back to the Petri dish. When we are creative people, creative-minded people, and we have to remember that for our creativity to not be useless beauty, like it says in Proverbs and pretty much the whole book of Ecclesiastes, if our creativity is not to be useless, then it really needs to produce something. They call film producers because they're making things. And so when we look at creativity, and particularly using our creativity or media to influence culture, I think we have to remember that ooze in the Petri dish is a definition of culture. And somebody made that ooze, that culture, and culture isn't something that just happens, or creativity, but we really need to go out there and use our creativity to make culture. Culture is something that we make, but not just us, but everybody out there in the world makes culture. And God is a very creative God. God uses God creates beautiful flowers that bloom in the Amazon that nobody will ever see. God's creativity is extravagant. But I think it's interesting looking at all these, because these are things that you would talk about in business circles, like at an entrepreneurial workshop, rather than a workshop on creativity for creative people. But I think it's more spot on. A good definition of entrepreneurship is creativity plus innovation. So the creativity in entrepreneurship is something that That's the whole taking an idea. It's having a new idea. Whether that's filling a gap in the market or giving something a voice, or improving an existing product or process. I think that, the first step is the creativity. The next bit is the innovation, actually making the thing happen. And then the entrepreneurship comes into making it into a viable product. So I think that's just a challenge for us to ask ourselves and others, are we creative or are we just arty hippies? Something creative's happening with the mind.
Creativity.
Another point, are we self-indulgent or serving?
So I just wanted you to qualify what you're saying in terms of, you haven't really spoken about, what you're making it sound quite logical. And it was quite logical, whereas doesn't creativity appeal to the emotions and the senses? It's not necessarily logical.
Well, there's a lot of discussion about right brain, left brain. The right brain, I think, is the creative side. The left brain is the logical side. But I think for creativity to go from just being some sort of useless beauty to actually creating a product or a, and I'm talking business terms, but a product could be an artwork, then it needs to have both sides, is where I'm coming from. So we need to have the creative side and the logic side. A friend of mine calls it logictivity. So instead of creativity, we have the combination of logic and creativity.
To add on to what you said, I actually had an interesting conversation with a graphic designer.
Yep.
And he said design serves a purpose. And one of the best designs ever created was the doorknob.
Yeah, right.
It's not just to look pretty, it also serves a purpose.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the two, left and right, get together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great example. I guess my frustration, in a bit of background, is a lot of Christian groups that I go to. I've gone to some groups where it's all about, being creative, but it tends to be more about self-indulgence. I've sat through 2-hour poetry readings. Why? Everybody seemed to be enjoying themselves, and everybody seemed to know the guy at the front, and he was a good mate of theirs or something, and they all clapped, and then we did some chanting later on, and things like that. And I was just sitting through this workshop, fortunately with my wife, because my wife assured me that I'm not the only one that thought it was all insane. But I'm just going, what's the point of all this? And I actually asked the guy, and remember this is a Christian thing, and I said, look, it wasn't, I said it was all very creative and out there, but I don't quite get the point of it. Like, what in this conference motivates people to go and do something? And he said, oh, well, no, this one is all about the why. He goes, the how, other people can work out. And I sort of went, oh, yeah, okay. But I think creative people know why they have to be creative or why they want to be creative. It's because they have to. It's in their blood. It's the way they're wired. So I don't think that, conducting a whole workshop on, why we need to be creative is as important as a workshop of, well, look, we are all creative, some more arty than others, but if we never take our talent and we never apply it to something that is actually going to be useful for somebody else, then what's the point? And so I have to ask the question, for creative people, are we self-indulgent or are we serving? And I think when we are Christians and we realise that it's not about us anymore, that we are second and that God is first, that we are dying to ourselves and becoming, to make room to become more like Christ, we can't afford to go to workshop sessions like that and, just kind of worship our own creativity or others' creativity. It's almost a form of idolatry, you might say, that we're putting our creativity before the Creator. So yeah, what are we going to do with our creativity, I think is a very important question. What do people think about having boundaries or parameters for creativity? Colouring outside the lines. Do you feel that creativity should just be unrestrained and we can, just let our creativity run wild? Or are there benefits to having, having some dimensions of, of where we have to work in? Am I not being clear? Yeah?
Maybe it's a process, and to start with, there are no limits, and then in order to implement the experience, you have to have some kind of boundaries to make it happen in reality.
Yeah. Yeah, you got a question or?
Well, I'm just thinking that artists are usually the ones that break boundaries. You know?
Yeah, that's
so
right.
So maybe it's more of a wisdom to do that.
Yep.
Tastefully.
Yep. So yeah, and I think that's the common concept, that artists are ones that are rebels or breaking boundaries or revolutionary. Yep.
Just on that, I think even that answer suggests having boundaries. So I think the idea of no boundaries doesn't lead to any creativity. I think, as soon as constraints are put in, creativity is squeezed out. And if that involves breaking those boundaries while doing it, that's great too. But without any boundaries, there's almost zero creativity.
I think there's a difference between God's boundaries and human boundaries, because Jesus was breaking boundaries like that. That made no sense that we made for ourselves, that we're rather a cage than something protective.
Yeah.
So maybe.
I think this again leads into our creativity becoming useful. When a new writer becomes a journalist, they start off by writing lots of detail and using using big words and trying to sound impressive, essentially. And then they meet an editor when they get a job as a journalist, and the editor goes, right, we don't need that word. A 10-year-old can't understand that word, so that one's going. We don't need 3 adjectives, we just need to say the black cat. And so that's a boundary. But by having that boundary in place, what happens? It produces better writing. The same way as a painter has to be limited by the canvas. If he's painting on a canvas, the four sides of it. Whereas if he just let his creativity totally loose, we'd have, flowers and elephants and abstract creatures all over these walls, and all over the floor. But no, to create something that is useful, and even to create something that is seen as beautiful, the artist needs to work within the boundaries of the 4 walls.
Okay, I'm in a social media environment. I think the greatest test of your creativity is to write something absolutely fantastically meaningful in one Twitter post.
Oh, sure.
And you have 140 characters. There's a guy that I follow, he writes Twitter stories.
Oh, yeah.
An entire story in 100, and that, I mean, that's a test.
And that's a boundary. That's a big boundary,
Exactly.
140 characters.
Would it be wrong to rather say guidelines as opposed to boundaries?
Eh.
And boundaries for me is almost like you can't.
Oh, creative people hate boundaries. Yeah. But with boundaries, our creative products become more beautiful or better writing. You know, and I'm talking about the writing process in my own experience, not saying my writing's really good, but I know that in the past, you know, I've finished a 90-page screenplay, and I've gone, whew, awesome. I finished 90 pages. That's a lot of writing, and it is, and it's an achievement. But usually the first draft is absolutely terrible. And it's not until the second draft and the third draft and the fourth draft where I actually start to cut out words or add pictures, you know, add direction, movement, and you know, just really rethink it, that my writing becomes much better, you know, even to whatever standard I'm able to get to. Because if I write a children's story, which I have, and I put the first draft out and I show it to everybody, it's like, oh, yeah, it was all right, or yeah, I didn't quite understand what was happening here, and yeah, it seemed a bit long-winded in place. I actually fell asleep, you know, in chapter 3. That's when I need to go back, and usually that's my wife, but that's when I need to go back and go, right, let's look at this with my logical brain and my creative brain at the same time, using logictivity, and actually seeing how I can make this better. So Stephen King talks about the first draft is telling the story to yourself, because you are pretty much making up the story as you go. So the first draft is telling the story to yourself. The second and subsequent drafts are telling the story to other people. So it's a different mentality like that.
There's another way to look at it, that boundaries are your tools as a creative person. For instance, you're writing in English. English is your boundary. As a painter, the colours or the canvas or the whatever are your boundaries. Actually, so that you can see boundaries as being your tools of your craft. Yeah.
And yeah, that's a good analogy, because you know, a sculptor or somebody making I don't know, a doll's house, you know, in their garage with their tools, they don't just, you know, cut a piece of timber and go, right, that's the dollhouse. No, they have to use the tools to cut it and trim it and glue things together. And yeah, I think boundary is, you know, and that might be helpful to you as well, rather than going, oh, boundaries. No, we don't want boundaries. But I think if we look at boundaries as tools, or whatever other word you want to use, but they're still boundaries, then it actually will produce a much higher quality product. It's a bit like, you know, you can join a church band and, you know, because you think you can play the drums. I've done that, actually. Somebody asked if I could play the drums, and I said, oh, I assume so. So I got up and played one Sunday morning, and it wasn't great. But, you know, as I've learned to practice on different instruments, I find that, you know, that I get a lot better. So practice is a type of boundary as well.
Isn't an opposite of the obvious approach
usually end up in a logical solution. Because almost every bit of creativity that comes to its climax can be examined afterwards and you say, well, that is the logical way we should have done it in the first place. We didn't see it. But now, suddenly looking at it like that, that's the only way.
Like a wicked problem. Yeah, that in, no, if everyone's heard that term, but you know, often politicians talk about wicked problems, or they talk about it in business. It's nothing to do with the devil. It's, it just means that there's a problem that they don't know what the solution is. And like you're saying, you often, it's through trial and error and through a creative process that you actually find the solution to the problem. But you don't know what the solution to the problem is until you found it. So, yeah, they're fun problems. Another thing is focus. You know, are we focused on what we're doing, focused on our creativity, or are we completely lost? Often creative people, and I've certainly been there myself and can go there again, we've got 1,000 ideas in our head and we don't have 1,000 hours a day to do them all. You know the saying about don't put all your eggs in one basket? That's a good saying when it comes to financial investing. It's good to diversify your investments. But I think when it comes to entrepreneurship and creativity with the aim of making a product, a creative product, then it's actually bad advice. Because like a jack of all trades, if we try to do a dozen things, you know, at the same time, we end up doing them very badly, all of them, and we don't produce anything that's going to be able to sell, you know, in a DVD shop or something like that. So I think there's a big call for creative-minded people to really become focused, to focus on that one egg at a time. Any thoughts on that? It's kind of like, you know, another part is, you know, what do we do with our creativity? Are we just going to join the amateur theatre company, or are we just going to paint landscapes in our backyard? And if that's all that people want, that's fine, you know. But if we want to influence culture and create something that is a beautiful end result, a beautiful product, then we need to find a way of, well, selling it, almost. We need to find a way of creating something that reaches a market. So like, you know, like a Venn diagram, we've got creativity over here, and on this side, well, let's just say career. And so we need to grab our creativity and look at available careers, or I don't just mean working for somebody else, but ways to make money. And we have to find our sweet spot, which is somewhere in here, where we go, well, for example, just using myself as an example again, just to get us started, but I love to write, you know, and I've written some books and screenplays, and none of them have really made, you know, a great deal of income. And I would like nothing better than to sit in my pyjamas, in my home study, and, you know, just write my novels all day, every day. That would be great. The reality for me, though, at the moment at least, is that they're not selling. You know, not enough to make an income, I mean. And so one thing that I've been able to do just recently is consult to a large, it's a large national charity in Australia that works with homeless people in the country. And they have Christian roots. They go back 150 odd years, and they basically want to reconnect with the Christian market, because they've realised that even though up at the top executive and board level, they're all evangelical Christians, they very much realise that their organisation isn't. There's not many people in the organisation that I've met who are Christian. So anyway, a bit of background there. But what they've asked me to do is to write for them a strategy of how they can engage with the Christian market. And not important, but what I've actually written back to them and said, well, here's a strategy, but it's only going to work if you become an authentic Christian organisation internally. And I gave them some practical examples of how to do it. But what was interesting about that, I realised, because it was well paid, and I sort of went, well, there's all these magazines like the Writer magazine from the US and different blog articles about how to make money as a freelance writer, or where to get your poetry published, or how to sell art and that sort of stuff. And I sort of went, well, all I do all day is I read stuff and then I write a little bit about what I've read. And so I thought, well, this isn't my ideal, this isn't writing novels, but it's actually still reading, which is 3/4 of being a writer anyway, and writing. So that's one example of how I've been able to find that sweet spot between what I'm naturally good at and what I've studied to become better at, and the reality of how we can make money in 2017. Has anyone else got an example like that?
No, I think to a great extent what has happened in my life in ministry as far as the radio programs is concerned is I have found that, I also love research, lots of reading and Bible study and things like that. But I also enjoy writing, and I also enjoy being creative as far as radio is concerned. And in the radio program, I've actually found an environment where I can do all the research and all the Bible study and the writing, plus being creative and present the program and make the program something that people would like to listen to. It becomes like a weekly exercise for me that I go through. And I've said to many people in the past that if I can only lose my life within that environment, that's perfect. That's the best thing, because really everything that I love doing is just there. Although it's not the ideal thing, I would have liked to go much bigger and so on, but I find everything extremely suitable where it is now.
Yeah, and every film director goes through that. You can imagine, Michelangelo didn't get to just paint what he wanted on the Sistine Chapel. He was paid to draw certain things. He couldn't just do paintings of Greek mythology, for example, which maybe that's what he was into. But so every creative person throughout history has had to struggle with these type of boundaries, or to find their sweet spot in the era that they live in. Yep.
And Josh, I'm sure, obviously as well, I think you put that in various ways, but also to add the circle of call, of calling. That's C as well. But the distinguishing that from what we love doing, I think it's that thing that you see in the world that you feel that tug towards, even if you don't like it. for me at the moment, it's every time I hear someone speaking about adoption, I can kind of sense God starting to just do something in me. I almost want to fight it because I'm like, we've got 3 kids, I don't know, whatever. So, but I'm just giving a personal example. Just every time I hear a story, I'm starting to feel that. Now that's an example of call. But where your call, your career, and your creativity intersect, then you've got a sweet spot too, because it's more than just, it's a holy discontent, it's something that's in the world, plus, or not in the world, plus your skill set, plus your creativity coming together, that's a beautiful place to be.
Yeah, I'm in a challenging position because I've been involved with creative activities all my life. And at one time I used to also write screenplays, and I had a theatre company and we toured around, and I did a lot of my own creativity in those days, but I've spent many years helping other people turn their creativity into something marketable. Through musicians, artists, speakers, authors, filmmakers. But I've lost my own creativity. I've been working alongside other people and mentoring and everything. I'm at that stage where I feel God prompting me, what about what you going to bring? You know, because I've helped elevate so many others, but what about me, and what about my ability to write and design and all of that? Where's that got? So I'm challenged with that.
I was thinking one thing about calling is interesting because, well, naturally I'm a workaholic. You know, even now when I go to the Sydney office on this consulting job, I write all the way up on the train, which is an hour and a half from my place, and I ride all the way back on the train, and I spend 8 hours there. I'll go for a jog at lunchtime, but only because I've put a calendar alarm in there every day at 1:30 saying take a break, which I usually do. But one thing that I found is, and it was almost like an idol, was I love to achieve. And I knew that I could. I knew that I worked harder than a lot of people, and I knew that, you know, I was more determined than a lot of people that I knew, and I knew I could do stuff, you know, and it was almost wanting, like making a film, for example, 1500 Steps. It was like, yeah, finally, I've been talking about making a feature film for years and years, and finally the opportunity's here on my doorstep. And I can choose to do it, which I did. But I think that you can often have the calling, you know, years before God's ready for you to actually act on it. And I'm just speaking vulnerably from my own experience, really. You know, it might be that the right timing is tomorrow. But I remember when I agreed to make 1500 Steps, because somebody came with a budget and a screenplay, and they just needed somebody to produce it. And I was like, yeah, all right. But it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare for years and years and years. And look, I mean, you know, if you see the film tonight, it turned out fine. I mean, it got into Walmart and that sort of stuff. But we had to repair it, and, you know, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of stress and sleepless nights, and it was a nightmarish couple of years for me. And as I was looking back on it, I realised at the time, and I was tossing it up, and my wife's going, you know what, I'm not sure if this is right, Josh. Why don't you just do your own film and raise your own money? Why are you making somebody else's? And I sort of went, well, you know, it's an opportunity and it's here and there's actual money. And I remember at the time that I agreed to do it with the person with the money, I knew it wasn't God's will. I knew it wasn't the right thing for me to do, but I didn't care. And this is only a personal thing, like you can only know this, you know, yourself, I guess. But for me, in my life and my understanding of God and timing and stuff, I recognised at the time that, nah, this is probably not the right thing for me to do, but I so much wanted to make a feature film that I went, oh, look, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it anyway. And it really wasn't until a fair time after that, maybe 3 years into the process, which was supposed to be 6 months, that I recognised what I'd done, and I repented of doing that. And, you know, this is just my own story. And it was at that time that things actually started to go right, funnily enough. And I'd love to make another feature film, and, you know, many more. And the thing is, when you do something like that, everyone's waiting for your next one. And, you know, people are sending me novels they've written because they say, oh, this novel's perfect to be turned into a screenplay, and I'm reading it and going, yeah, but not a good one. And yeah, people will send me scripts that they would like my opinion on, which I've learnt to not do, because nobody actually wants your opinion. They just want you to tell them how good it is. Like there was one screenplay I got from a young girl in Melbourne, and it was all very arty, and I was reading like through it, and I got to page 2, and I went, oh, okay, that character goes to the city, he finds out that he's gay, and then he comes back, and you know they're having a bit of controversial discussion about it. So I got to the end of it, and that's exactly what it was about. And I sort of said, look, I don't know, this has kind of been done a lot, you know, like a confused guy goes off somewhere, comes back, he tells everyone he's gay, he's got a boyfriend, and, you know, and that's the end of the story. I said, I think that one's kind of been done to death. And I said, why don't you have a gay guy who goes off to the city and then comes back and he's straight? Yeah. I didn't hear from her again. So I've segued a little there. But yeah, so anyway, I think, yeah, I certainly appreciate what you're saying, and I just thought I'd share that about my experience with running ahead of God. And I burned myself out, yeah, on meds and everything, you know, because of that and some other things. So I've really learned now to, you know, just sort of wait on God's timing, and I don't mean just sit around and do nothing. Like, I still work hard, and I still believe in strategy and planning and, you know, motivating other people, like my team and stuff. You know, if you're good at that sort of thing, if you're good at business, you know, be good at it. But before I go into anything major now, I'll say, well, God, this seems to be what you want me to do, and you know me, Lord. You know, I'm a bulldog. Once I get going, I'm just going to keep going. So you're going to have to stop me if you want me to slow down. Yeah.
It's just a comment. I think with me, exercising my creativity, I love always coming up with ideas. I love spotting gaps, challenges, and asking a question, how can we bridge this gap? But at times you find that lack of resources is a challenge, you know, in terms of applying, you know, a solution or whatever you came up with. And at times you find that if you don't have authority to, you know, proceed with application or implementation, it also becomes a challenge. It's frustrating.
Yeah, I think as creative people, we just, you know, we're always going to be frustrated. You know, frustrated with ourselves and frustrated with our circumstances. But you know, I think that frustration for Christians can go two ways. You can become bitter and resentful that whatever you had in your mind isn't just never happened, or, well, you know, we're all still young, hasn't happened yet. You know, or you can go, I guess, the other way and not becoming bitter, but actually becoming even more creative and going, well, all right, that didn't work, and that didn't work, and that didn't work, but let's rethink this. Let's take it back to the drawing board and come up with another solution. I mean, it's like Hollywood film producers, even famous ones. They have in mind to make a film, and a lot of them have taken 20 years to actually, get the green light, as they say, to produce the film that they've had a vision for. So, that's a long time to carry that burden, that vision that you have. A friend of mine recently produced his first feature, but for years he had a vision to make a film going back more than 20 years ago, and for 10 years he was carrying this vision, and it was growing and growing and growing, bigger in his brain, but for 10 years he managed a mobile phone shop. It was sort of part of a Christian thing that funded the local Christian television. And he finally got out of that, and then he started a Christian film distribution company in Australia. So he'd go to NRB convention or AFM and things like that in the States mainly, and then come back with all these films, which is actually how I got to see Faith Like Potatoes. So he got films from all over the place. Still my favourite Christian film. But anyway, and so he did that for more than 10 years. And I sort of, until I got to know him better, I thought that was his thing, that's what he wanted to do. But now he's moved on from that, somebody else is managing it, and because he now knows how the distribution thing works, which is the hardest part, making the film as gut-wrenching and brain-draining as it is actually the easy bit. Anyone that's made a creative product will know that. Getting it out into the market is the hardest bit. I've got another workshop on that tomorrow. He's finally made his first film, and I don't know that it went off super duper, but he'll probably get his money back. Yeah.
I have a two-part question. With a team of creatives. Now we have, at times we have tight timelines which we need to stick to get things out. How do we foster an environment of creativity within the group, knowing that oftentimes creative people will butt heads because we are all so in love with our solution that I can nitpick all the problems with the next person's one, and when someone nitpicks mine, it's conflict. How do we foster an environment where it's open enough for us to all be creative, but also results and time oriented at the same time? How do we foster such an environment?
Timelines are another boundary, and if we want to be a hobbyist, if we just want to paint landscapes in our backyard, or if we just want to do interpretive dance, in the bathroom, not speaking from experience, then that's all very well, but you'll never get a job from that and never make money. Ultimately, every person, creative or not, has to learn that a deadline's a deadline, and things have to be finished by a certain time. Even Stephen King, you can tell I'm a fan, but even Stephen King says that he goes, you hear stories about these people that have spent 10 years writing a novel, and it's a big deal and it sells, and they really promote that, 10 years in the making. But he says, he goes, you can't leave these characters. These characters are people that you've created, and you can't just leave them, alone, sort of for 10 years. You've got to push it out, and you've got to get, your second draft out within a 6-month period. Otherwise, it all just falls apart and just becomes fluff, becomes useless beauty. The first part of your question, what was it? Getting creative people to...
Just fostering an environment.
Oh, fostering an environment of creativity, yeah. It's like churches don't usually know how to work with creative people. They don't quite get them. And what can happen in the church and the workplace is that the manager or the pastor, interchangeable, will say, well, I need this and this and this. And the creative person goes, oh, okay, great. And they come up with a great concept and a great design, a great performance, and then they check it with the manager or the pastor, and the pastor goes, oh, well, I don't like that, you know. And you have to treat creative people like that quite carefully, because yes, they're sensitive, but you know, they may need to get over that and toughen up a bit, but they'll always be a little sensitive because of the way that they're wired. And it's wrong to just say, well, no, I don't like that, without explaining why you don't like it. For me, working with a creative team at the moment in Sydney, web designers, you know, people that design little logos and icons and all sorts of stuff, as well as writers, I find that it's best to give them a very clear brief. So the concept, discuss the concept with them, and then say, well, it's got to have this, it's got to have this, you know, it's, you know, whatever the arrangements are, it's good to give them a detailed brief, but then let them run with it after that. You know, let them come up with their interpretation of it. And obviously along the way, if you're the one responsible for the end result, you're going to have to give direction. But I find, you know, like micromanaging, well, probably micromanaging anybody isn't good, but micromanaging a creative person never works, because it's like the more that you tell them off, the more that you're saying, well, this is wrong and this is wrong. They do what, you know, my son used to do when he was in trouble when he was 10. It's just, you know, off to his room. And you actually kill their creativity by being too negative. So I think to foster a creative environment, you have to acknowledge their creativity, acknowledge their talents, and acknowledge their professionalism, and say, well, look, you know we need it to be like this, you know it's got to be the corporate colours, you know it's got to do such and such, so run with that, you know. And yeah, and I think that's a good way to foster a creative environment.
If I can add just to that, all the training I've ever had in creativity is based on learning to deal with criticism, because it's the way you grow.
Yeah.
So if you can't put out your work and let it be criticised and receive the criticism and do it better,
yeah,
you won't grow. And what your whole point of taking it to market and making it, monetizing it, the key is learning how to deal with that criticism.
Yeah, it's like at a recent Christian writers workshop I was at, yeah, somebody asked about, you know, a poem. You know, it's like, well, what if I write a poem and, you know, I just feel like God's given it to me and, you know, it doesn't matter if people don't like it. And I sort of went back with the thing of, well, is it your first draft? Because, you know, most screenplay writers will say the first draft is rubbish, or a more harder word. And yeah, it's sort of like, I don't know, it's like a plumber, you know, doing, you know, having one go at putting in the pipes for the new laundry. But then he takes a look back and goes, oh no, that's not straight, or that's not at the right angle, I need to redo that, or I need to dig down here and adjust there. Everybody has to adjust. Drawing a butterfly, like that. Okay. I go, right, okay, well I've done, that's my creativity, I've done my product, that's what God's told me to do. It's just laziness, I think. If God's told you to do something, well then go and get a degree, go and do some art classes, catch some butterflies, learn how to create the best product possible. One thing that we do badly as Christian creators is we don't create, we don't come up with new concepts, but we copy. Like there's a lot of American, I'm trying to think of a name, but it doesn't matter, I'm sure you can think of them, but they're, one I watched, it was really good, and I can't quite remember the story or anything, but I remember watching this one Christian film and going, oh, that was actually all right, And I thought, oh yeah, actually that was a pretty good storyline. That was pretty unique and that sort of thing. And then a few months later, I saw a normal Hollywood film, which was exactly the same story, done a year or so before this one, and I went, oh, that's why it was good. Okay. Because they copied it. And you see pictures of the whiskey Jack Daniels, old number 77 or something. I had a t-shirt. I didn't even know anything. I didn't even know that Jack Daniels was a whiskey. But when I was in junior high school, I had a t-shirt that said Old Book of Daniel. Book of Daniel, old number 7. And there's many, many examples, like the Coca-Cola Christian stickers, Jesus adds life, Jesus is the real thing. It's like, can't we do better than that? I mean, if we are the sons and daughters of the creator of the world and the universe, I think we're supposed to be leading the way in the arts and in creativity as well, rather than being followers or even worse, copiers.
Thanks for bringing that specific thing up. Because at times you notice that you'll come up with something new and people won't really take it up until it's been done over and over again. So oftentimes we will just decide, you know what, nothing is new under the sun. This is tried and tested, meaning we know people will take it up. Versus this is new, it's innovative, but we're not sure if people will buy into it.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of ways to look at it, and I think we're out of time, but the, like Steve Jobs from Apple never did market research because he was convinced that his job was to invent the future. But now that he's gone, Apple have become the copiers. Like there's much better smartphones out there now than the Apple iPhone and better tablets. And so, Apple, who was once a leader in that industry and, came up ultimately with the concept of the smartphone, they're now kind of second fiddle. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. Anyway, look, I hope this was okay. I thought it might be just useful rather than me getting up and doing another talk to have more of an interactive session. But I've certainly enjoyed hearing from you guys, even if it's not the case the other way around. That's fine. All right, thanks.